Hi, welcome to another episode of Anyone Can Paint. This is our third and final episode on this painting, and we've got quite a bit to do, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to pick up where we left off last week with the small flat bristle brush, and we're going to go through and start finishing up the highlights on the rocks. This is going to be some white and a little bit of orange. And just a little bit of blue. And we're going to go up and finish these off. Can't believe I grabbed the right amount of blue. First time in 3 weeks. Some of these, like we spoke a little earlier last week, I think it was, is that some of these we're going to leave so those will look like they're underwater. And again, I was explaining quite a bit on the rocks last week. Make sure, put down your first initial stroke with your highlights and then soften it coming back into the rock. So you can leave all these little darks. Those are good things. It's really what helps incorporate the brights into the shadows. Here, go right like that. Again, you don't need to paint the whole rock. You just want to do enough that anyone can see clearly that that's a rock. And by doing that, you need to put in your highlight, which is that outer edge of the rock, and then you soften it coming back towards the shadow. I'm going to reload and I'll be right back. I'll do part of this guy. Got a little spot back here. We'll put a flat one. All right, let's go ahead and clean the brush out. I think that gets all of our rocks. And I think we're going to stay with that brush, and we're going to start going into putting in the highlights in the water. Again, this is going to be some white and blue, but this needs to be a lighter color than what your underpainting color is. So there's going to be white in it, obviously, but there needs to be a little bit of blue in it also. And we're going to get to the chiseled edge, and these, let me get a little bit more blank. This is going to be a little bit bright. Sometimes when you're mixing your colors on your palette, it appears to be okay until you get it up here and you look at it, and it's off a little bit. So just go back and make an adjustment. But as you're doing these strokes need to be horizontal the whole entire time. So every time you're making any of these strokes, these are going to go back and forth. Don't get a mistake of running with the length or with the angle of your river, because that's going to look like it's tilted. You want this to lie flat as it's working down. You don't want to cover up all of your underpainting, so you just want to come through and you want to put some of this along the edge so it settles all those rocks down. Work it right up to about there, because our waterfall is going to start right in that area there. You need to make these horizontal. And don't cover up all of your underpainting. Let's kind of show through. Alright. I think we'll get a larger brush for the waterfall, but let's continue with this one as we work down in and amongst the rocks. That's going to come down. We'll splash in here, but then it's going to flatten out in around this area. Same thing is true. You want to go through with horizontal strokes and go underneath every rock that's out in the water to some degree. That kind of helps settle those down. Now here we'll have, I know that we had a few smaller little waterfalls. So you want to put that in. If you turn your brush and push up and bend, you get little crashes. Grab the bottom again and start back with your horizontal strokes. I'm going to grab some more paint. I'll be right back. That continues working out. Maybe we'll have a little bit of one there. Again, underneath every one of those rocks, some of these little water lines have to happen. We'll make up a new batch here. I'll kind of brighten this up a little bit. There we go. Just kind of fluff that up a little bit. I'll brighten this one too. Again, grab the bottom of that. Work it down. There's a little bit of one there. If you go underneath every one of those rocks with a horizontal stroke, it settles those down, because water basically lies flat unless there's obviously some disturbance through some ripples, some wind currents, some waterfalls, anything like that. But basically, it lies flat. And here's one of those rocks that we're going to put under the water. And just by putting those strokes over it, but you can still see through there, it gives you that appearance that it's underneath. Just going to make it up a little bit more. Ooh, way too much blue that time. First is back. And over here, on top of that, settle this one down. And just kind of keep continuing to work down. Again, there's another one that appears to be underwater. Here's a couple other ones. So don't cover all that up. And we'll just kind of continue to work downstream. Make sure you go right along the shoreline and get those rocks so those kind of settle down a little bit too. Just like that. Go ahead and clean that brush out. We're going to go to the medium flat bristle brush. We're going to add a little bit of white to that color, and we're going to do that large waterfall part here. So it's just coming through, and you want to grab and just lightly pull that color over. You can have some thin areas where the blue kind of shows through a little bit. You can have some thicker areas where there's just basically white showing. So I'm going to crash a little bit there and bring that out forward. So that rock ends up getting underneath all that water, which is perfectly fine. But it would have been my luck if I had not highlighted it, it would have been left exposed and I would have had to go back. So I'll brighten this up a little. Go ahead and clean that out. All right, we're going to stay with the medium flat bristle brush. There's a couple, we got to put in a dead pine tree that's in here, then we'll go through with our liner brush and put in a few over there. This is going to be done with some blue and some brown. You want this to be on the dark side, so it's a little bit more blue in this. And this tree was located around in here, if I recall, and it started there and got a little bit wider as it went down to about there. I'll grab a little bit more color. I'm getting a bit of a glare there. So. And if you stay with that same brush and get it to the chisel edge, you can put some of these dead branches that come off it. Just want to go through and just kind of flick it out a little bit. And make these a little bit longer if you'd like to. There. Let's go ahead and clean that one out. We're going to use that same color. We're going to switch brushes and go to our script liner brush. Remember to get some water in that because we got to get that paint pretty wet. Roll your brush around in it. And it seemed like we had a dead pine tree in this area. Kind of goes up. I'll put it back through. Just kind of flick your brush a little bit. And that represents those dead limbs that come off of that. And I think we had one over in this area. Again, some dead branches. Just a little bit wider. So go ahead and clean that one out. And then we're going to go to our medium flat bristle brush. We had a stump over here with a tree that had fallen down. This again, some blue and brown. And first we're going to block in our stump. And that's going to go right in here. And then we had the tree itself was laying down something like this. Maybe sticking out over the edge of that river. I'm going to put a little bit more blue with that to darken that up. That's better. We can also pull some little dead limbs off of this. Just bring it back. Just kind of lift off a little bit. Make sure it's a little bit wider at the trunk, so it would be a little bit thicker. And there. Just do a little dye there. And we'll go ahead and clean that one out. Now we're going to stick with that brush. We've got to highlight the side of that pine tree there, the dead one we just put in. Again, this is going to be some white with a little bit of orange to it. And get to the chiseled edge, and you want to work on the outside edge. Remember, always be aware of where your sun's coming from, your light source. Just kind of bounce around, leaving some dark coming through. Just want to follow this all the way up. And get up here. Getting some shadows from that light. So hopefully that's about right. And we also want to do a little bit on the top edge of the branches that are sticking out. All right, now we'll clean out our brush. Now with that same brush, we're going to go through, we need to put some highlights on our pine trees that are in the foreground. So this is going to be done with a little bit of yellow, a little bit of green, again, you want to tap your brush a little bit so you don't get to the chiseled edge, but it just kind of opens the bristles a little bit. And we're going to go up here, again, you're just focusing on the right hand side. Just going through and just tapping. And these need to be done on the top side of the branches. And just kind of follow the contour of your tree. And I'm just tapping as I'm going through this. And do the same thing here. Just using the corner of the brush and just focusing on the tops of some of these branches. Again, I've mentioned this in other shows, is that sometimes when you're highlighting pine trees, you bring your highlights back towards the center of the tree, and it ends up being right dead smack in the middle, and they just come and they stop. Remember that your eye is always attracted to lighter colors and also patterns. So you don't want to develop a pattern like that. If you do, and you'll be able to tell pretty quick, just grab some of those and just bring them past center once in a while, just so it breaks up that edge, so it kind of darts in and out a little bit. Kind of helps bring a little bit more dimension to your pine trees also. I'm just going to reload. Again, tap on your bristles a little bit straight in. We'll get this one. And we have one more to do on the left. This one I'll just bring right smack dab in the middle, and I'll show you what I was talking about earlier. I'll bring the highlights right back to the center. Hopefully you get a chance to see what I'm talking about. You can see how it makes just a count, because they all come straight down. So what you want to do if that happens, just simply go back, just bring some of those back past center, and your eye just accepts it, and it does not notice that pattern anymore, and you're fine. So go ahead and clean that brush out. Now we got to put some highlights on our stump and on our fallen tree over here. This is going to be done with some white and some orange. And get it to that chiseled edge. A little bit more orange. Again, kind of wipe off some of the bulk of it. Remember again, highlights on the right hand side. Kind of bounce around. Leave some dark showing. Really, really important. I'm going to catch some of this, which is that top part that's broken off. And I'm just bouncing right around here. But I've left some back here so you can see it looks kind of hollowed out a little bit. All you got to do is just don't bring your highlights all the way up on that object. Just bring them down a little bit so the back side sticks up a little bit further. And you'll get that impression that it's hollowed out. And we're going to go across and do the same thing on our fallen tree here. So we're just going to go and just tap right across the top. Skip around a little bit. Now on the outer edge of that, I skip over where that limb is sticking out, because that needs to get highlighted going that way. But inside the tree part, you can continue with that bark look. Just bring that down, and just kind of bouncing around, leaving some darks. And we're going to go down the edge of those limbs. Again, if you do this bouncing and don't do a stroke, you kind of get that impression that it's kind of a chewed up, gnarly little branch that's been, broken off and things, but it only highlights the top ridges of, or it appears to be the top ridges of that limb. So if you break it up like that, it makes it look really interesting, like there's been a lot of things gone wrong with that tree. And that's why I like to do that bouncy motion, because you get away from those long strokes, because it just makes too smooth of an edge, especially on things that are really, really old, that wouldn't have happened with. There. We're going to clean that brush out. Now we need to go through with our fan brush, and before we do that, I just noticed something with this pine tree that's in the back. It's awfully tall for being very thin at the bottom, so I want to thicken this up a little bit. So it's a bit more realistic. There, that looks like we can support that now. Now we're going to take the small fan brush, go through around any of the rocks, the stumps, any of the trees that need to kind of get settled down a little bit. Again, going back to our yellow and green color. Now what often happens is because the paint that's on there for our highlight grass color is already dry, and of course acrylic's dry, a little bit darker, it's often very difficult to match the colors up that you're going to apply. So what artists do is that they kind of get close, and then they go up and they try it. And once in a while you get lucky, but if it's a lot brighter, you can just work this around a little bit and incorporate this here and there, and it doesn't really look like it was put in after the fact. Especially up around the pine trees. Just kind of put this here and there. You don't want to redo the whole entire thing, but you just want to incorporate this brighter color that we've applied, just so it looks like it's very, very normal, and maybe had been there all along, which we all know really wasn't the case. But that's how artists get around doing that, because sometimes too is if you have a number of different colors in a color that you used, there's no way you're going to remember what color those were. So just want to get close to it in the neighborhood, and just incorporate that color in other places, and you'll fool everybody every time. So that helps that tree to sit down. And we got all the rocks pretty good. Just go through where you feel that there should be a little bit more. And then on this side, we're going to do the same thing. Go up and around any rocks that need to be done. And then we're going to go up around the bottom of this tree, so the grasses are up on front of that, which helps settle that tree right down in there. Again, it's just enough that you can see some of those blades up on against the dark. And of course we want to settle down our stump, and just again incorporate this brighter color throughout, here and there. And make sure when you're doing around these rocks that you really get up enough where you can see it against that dark. It really settles those down and it looks so realistic. Alright, let's clean that out. And we've got a few minutes left, so I'll show you how you can go through and put some weeds in this. We're going to go back to the liner brush and go into that yellowish green color. Make sure you get some water. And get it to that nice little point. And you can come through. You just kind of go through and just lightly touch the canvas, but you pull these out. And these are like just individual little weeds that are sticking out. A little bit more water. There we go. And you can see how that kind of helps settle that down too. And if you want to bend them, they bend with the wind, and bring some up over some of the rocks a little bit here and there. But this is all done. You got to remember how to load that brush. You got to get the paint a little wet. You can just bring this up against some of the trees. in front of the log, which helps push that back. This is that brush that I've talked to you about that takes a little while to get used to, so you can build up some confidence. You're just going through and just barely touching the canvas, and just kind of twisting as you're making these. You get that nice little bend to them. You kind of put some up here against the trees in the back. Incorporate some over here if you want, especially up against that dark. These are, again, things that you can do that are very easy to do, but certainly you find these out in nature. I'm just going to put a few more down here in the rocks. And by doing that, you kind of really push all those things back. And I'm sorry, but we got to wind down, and we got it all in. I think it's a pretty close replica of what you see at the beginning of the show. Thank you so much for joining us again this week. This crane is a little bit more difficult, but it's nothing you can't handle, I'm sure. Make sure you check out our website. A lot of new information on there. If you need any help, any advice, any questions you have, call me or email me. I would love to help you out. You can really do this. I promise you can. Anyone can paint. Thanks for joining us. We'll